morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe. Well, this week on Wednesday, we witnessed one of the big occasions in the annual calendar of the European Union. The President of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, gave her annual State of the Union address to the European Parliament in Strasbourg. This was the fourth that she has given in her time as president of the Commission. And as we have the elections to the European Parliament next year, and the question of whether Ursula von der Leyen will be seeking a second term as president of the Commission. As you would expect, this speech was largely based on her achievements, the achievements of her commission. She even claimed that 90% of the program that she had on taking office had been implemented. There was also quite a lot on economic issues such as competitiveness in Europe and how to improve it. The point that industrial efficiency and productivity is not incompatible with action against climate change and greening the economy as well. She spoke a lot about the EU's response to the COVID-19 crisis. And interestingly, she also spent a lot of time making the case for EU enlargement, particularly to Ukraine, not underestimating the difficulties, not giving a timetable, saying it would be merits based, but also saying that it was vital to complete the unification of Europe within the EU, and all of the programs that the EU delivers could be delivered with 30 plus members just as well as they could be delivered with 27. But there was, for me, in a speech that went on for over an hour, one glaring omission, which was security and defense, hardly mentioned at all, except when she spoke a little bit about food security and praised the EU's farmers, of course, for ensuring that at a time when supply chains globally had been disrupted, they were still able to feed all of the European citizens. But that could have been a kind of sop to French farmers and Dutch farmers who have been protesting recently and asking for more subsidies. But why was security defense for me such a gap, an omission in the speech? Well, the first thing, of course, is that the EU has been spending a great deal of time on these things over the last 18 months or so. First of all, of course, the war in Ukraine, which shows that conventional war, military threats, mass destruction, the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives, of properties, has returned to Europe. And to a country which is a candidate for future EU membership. And this is not just about the destruction in Ukraine. The war has also crept closer to Europe, to the EU's own borders. For example, three drones landing recently in Romania, a missile landing in Poland, killing some Polish citizens, Russia building a new network of bases on the border with Finland, Russia and Belarus and the Central Security Treaty Organization holding exercises in Belarus on the border with Poland. Just a few days ago, the days in which the EU Commission could define security defense as the occasional cyber attack, the occasional energy outage, the occasional breakdown of critical infrastructure or disinformation campaign are long since over. Europe now has to confront the reality of military threats that require a military response. And if there is an EU social contract to be renewed, then guaranteeing the peace and the lives and the properties of EU citizens has to be the first principle of that social contract. The second reason is that the EU has been very active and innovative in security defense over the last 18 months. The Commission itself has been in the forefront by, for example, establishing a new Directorate General, DG DEFIS, under the Internal Market Commissioner, Thierry Breton, which is looking at defense industry, space, technology, and very active in currently trying to reopen defense production lines so that Europe can increase its stocks of vital military components and equipment. The Commission is running a European Defence Fund of over 8 billion euros to fund future R&D programs. It's also funding PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation, with nearly 50 projects to sponsor greater cooperation among EU members in things like field hospitals, developing an EU drone, an EU intelligence centre, the use of bases by various EU member states, and so on and so forth. More broadly, the EU has developed a European peace facility, beginning with 5 billion euros, now going up to 20 billion euros, which has been funding the transfer of weapons to Ukraine and training now 40,000 Ukrainian soldiers. It's also been used to fund the procurement of 1 billion 155 artillery shells for Ukraine, devoting 2 billion euros to that, and has given 500 million euros to reopen defence production lines. I could mention a host of other initiatives, for example, a European Sky Shield to integrate Europe's missile defence, a European Rapid Reaction Force, a brigade of 5,000 rapid deployable soldiers, a military mobility scheme to move troops and equipment rapidly across EU borders in a crisis situation, and a large scale cyber resilience team program to help EU member states get assistance quickly in the case of cyber attacks. Ursula von der Leyen could have also mentioned the need for more European strategic autonomy, particularly to deal with crises on the periphery where NATO or the US do not wish to become engaged, and to give Europe a cover, an assurance, should, for example, a populist president like Donald Trump return to power in the United States after the elections next year. So, if paraphrasing the Spanish King Alfonso XIII, God had put me in charge of the universe, I would have ordered things somewhat differently. And if I had been the speechwriter of Ursula von der Leyen's speech, what would therefore I have changed? Well, certainly I would have made a reference to the urgent task for the EU to make sure that Ukraine prevails in its war against Russia as vital for the peace of the EU and not just for Ukraine. Secondly, I would have made a plea to use defence spending wisely, with all the EU states increasing defence budgets up to the NATO target of 2% to make sure that we avoid duplication and that we promote the European defence industries and the European defence industrial base. For example, Poland this week announced that it was spending $12 billion in the United States to procure 426 high miles long range artillery systems. Well, of course, this is good for Poland, it's good for NATO, but if everybody buys American, that defence industrial base of the EU will stagnate, threatening the 400,000 jobs in the EU, which are already in the defence industry. Secondly, Ursula von der Leyen could have made a pitch for greater debt financing by the Commission of Europe's rearmament programs, particularly restocking. For example, the EU has been able to contract debt at favourable AAA terms to finance the recovery from the COVID pandemic. The same could be used to quickly ramp up the reopening of defence production lines. Thirdly, she could have called on the EU to cooperate more in developing the future military technologies. She made a strong pitch for artificial intelligence, but then described the EU's role as regulating that rather than developing the technology itself and making the EU a player in that particular field. She could have mentioned robotics. She could have mentioned quantum computing and secure cryptographics, space, and making sure that European satellites are not interfered with, bioengineering, and all of the rest. She could have also made a strong pitch for greater cooperation between NATO and the EU, as both spend money now on defence industry programs and on R&D and innovation. She could have also spoken of the need to cooperate closely with partners such as the US, the UK, Turkey, and beyond in the Asia Pacific, with countries like Japan and Australia as well. In short, the EU often talks of a defence union, and yesterday would have been a very good opportunity for Ursula von der Leyen to say exactly what that defence union is all about. Well, it was a speech which was strong on past achievements and mentioned a number of contemporary challenges, but it was not very oriented towards the future, Well, if Ursula von der Leyen is re-elected and serves another 5 years, or her successor, they soon will have a golden opportunity to come back to the European Parliament for the next State of the Union speech. And that would then be the time to sketch out that future vision in the field, which I think is really at the top of the agenda: security and defense. Thank you for listening today, and I look forward to engaging with you very soon.